Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Matt and I'm currently a double degree medical student at the University of Sydney. And in today's video, I wanted to share with you some of the things that I did after my trial examinations that I think were crucial towards my success in the HSC externals. And I'll be framing these as a series of tips, and here are the timestamps for them because I know that your time is very valuable as well. So tip number one is self-reflection. Now, I know how annoying it is when people talk about this very generally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about some of the specific questions that I asked myself and also leave a whole bunch of them down below in the description so you can start this process right now. Your idea after finishing trials is probably just to chill for a bit and then get back into the grind, and that's perfectly okay. But what I'd suggest is that in the next week or so, allocate some time to actually reflecting not only on your exam performance while it's still fresh in your mind, but also the study that you've done in the past year or so, because that's going to give you an idea of how to approach the study in the next 2 months leading up to your HSC. I really like to ask myself very broad, reflective questions and then narrow it down to more specific issues that I would identify and then try to resolve. And so one of the questions I asked myself was, now that I've done the examination, how effective was each section of my study? And that would narrow down to something more specific. For example, I realized that doing those old 2008 to 2012 exam past papers was actually less effective than rereading the textbook to refresh those basic fundamental concepts. And another question that I asked myself was, were there specific types of questions or dot points that I wish I'd paid more attention to? One of the issues that came up for me from that question was that I was particularly unconfident with the compare and contrast questions in the short response section of English paper 1. So now I knew that was an area that I needed to put more focus on. And here's another question that I asked myself. Were there long-term distractions that ultimately affected my exam performance? So one of the things that I learned about myself is that I study less effectively when I'm studying with 4 or 5 other people compared to when I'm just studying with one other person, which seems to be the sweet spot for me. So this growth mindset is really powerful, right? Because now that you've identified tangible issues, you can then make the necessary changes to your study routine. So tip number 2 is to not get complacent. Now, I know this might seem like a no-brainer, but between now and your final HSC exams, there will come a point where you feel a steady decrease in your motivation to study. And I've been through that exact same process, which is why in hindsight, I think I can offer both an explanation and a solution for that problem. You know, when you learn things for the first time, usually the element of surprise helps you to stay focused. But now that you've learned most of the syllabus content, and I'm sure you've done plenty of practice questions, it can actually get really easy to delude yourself into thinking that you know the content well, and that can lead to procrastination. And that's especially true considering you've got days coming up where you essentially have no schoolwork at all and the whole day to yourself. And it can be really easy to, think that you have plenty of time when that may not necessarily be the case. So what I found is most effective in combating something like this is a sense of urgency, not stress, because that is a volatile emotion, but a controlled sense of urgency, a single number in the back of your head that encapsulates how close the deadline really is. So let's do that right now. So here's a little bit of an idea of your time frame. So if you've just finished trials, then that means it's probably mid or end August, depending on your school. And if you're doing 5 subjects and you're studying, let's say 8 hours a day, then that means you have about 96 hours per subject until HSC rolls around. So there's actually not that much time. Obviously, I'm not asking you to study every waking moment, but be more effective with the time that you do have, and you will begin to see yourself improving substantially more. So tip number 3 is to start your day with subjects that you don't like. And there's usually a reason why you don't like certain subjects. And it's probably because you know it's one of your weaker ones. And that's perfectly normal to want to do your stronger subjects because we want that kind of self-confirmation and instant gratification. I remember I used to push my English essays back to the end of the day or maybe even the next day and just focus on maths past papers. And my justification for that was, since it was helping me and it was study related, therefore there was nothing wrong with it. And I think that's a justification either consciously or subconsciously that a lot of students do make. And there's actually an inherent flaw in that argument, and I'm going to explain it by throwing a graph up on the screen. So you've probably seen this before, but essentially what it's trying to say is that there is an optimal point where the amount of effort that you put in translates proportionally to the results that you get. But past that optimal point, in order to get better results, you need to spend more and more and more effort. So unless all your subjects are already at that optimal point, it makes more sense to spend the extra time that you do have on your weaker subjects. And on top of that, HSC is a balancing game. So having a decent mark across the board is ultimately going to give you a better ATAR than if you do really well in a subject but neglect another. Let's take student A and student B, for example. Student A spends proportionally more time in his weaker subjects, and as a result, he gets a pretty even scaled mark of 90 for all his subjects. That gives him an ATAR of about 98.30. Let's say you have student B. He pours all his time into chemistry because he really loves it. And as a result, he gets an amazing mark of 98, which would have placed him 9th in the state in 2019. But as a result, he neglects his English and gets an 80. Overall, the ATAR would become 97.75, which is lower than student A even though he has a state rank under his belt. And whilst these ATARs are just estimates, the point still stands that between now and HSC externals, you should really be spearheading your poorest performing subjects. Thank you very much for watching up to this point, but before you click off, we're still a very new channel, so we'd really appreciate any sort of feedback down in the comments below, stuff you liked or disliked, and that'll really help us to deliver better and more useful content. And also, we'll be releasing medical entry related videos, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, consider hitting the subscribe button. Thank you, and have a great day.